As joint practices start with the San Francisco 49ers, we have a whole bunch of stuff to go through, including Ed Ingram probably has just won the right guard job. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And the Vikings have started their joint practices with the San Francisco 49ers. They had one yesterday. We will recap it. They have one today, doing a lot of the same stuff. And the headlines out of these practices are, I don't know, I guess there are three things that I guess are noteworthy items. One, Ed Ingram working with the ones. That is very meaningful, and coupled with the sort of forward momentum that he had the last couple weeks and his performance in the preseason game, I feel pretty good calling that one. The AP News Desk has called that one for Ed Ingram. Two, the Vikings kind of balled. They just kind of beat up they just did really well against the NFC runner-ups of last year, which is very cool. And three, Kirk Cousins is back, and he swore. So that's not a lot to say about that one, but goodness, we got an F-bomb out of Kirk Cousins? What'd y'all do to him? His purity, his innocence has been tarnished. You monsters. I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's start with the Ed Ingram stuff. I'm calling it. Ed Ingram won the job. He's your starting right guard. That seems to have been where the momentum was headed. That seems to be what happened in the wake of the preseason game. So I went back and watched some of the Ed Ingram reps and the Jesse Davis reps. I agree with this. So here's the thing. If you haven't been paying attention all offseason, there's an off-field thing with Ed Ingram you should probably know about. I'm not going to inundate you with the details of this off-field thing, but know that it was a pretty gross sexual assault case from when everybody involved was minors. And I have an article in the show notes that I wrote up kind of specifically for this, so I didn't have to rehash the point every time. So go check that out if you're interested, or if you don't care. I will never know. I just don't want it to go ignored and just be one of those things that you talk about once and then ignore for the rest of the time. Anyways, he's probably going to be your starting right guard. That means Jesse Davis is probably a backup, and that kind of puts a whole bunch of roster pressure on the interior offensive line. Jesse Davis's contract sort of precludes you from cutting him. If you release him, you incur enough dead cap to actually make it more expensive to cut Jesse Davis than it would be to keep him and never play him. And he can kick out to guard. To tackle. He's a terrible tackle, and I honestly would rather have Oludo out there at tackle. But you can kick him out to tackle in some kind of emergency that is better than somebody who just has never played tackle before. And he still is a decent backup guard for you. Then you have Chris Reed, who is hurt right now, who was making a heck of a case to be a swing interior lineman, but can't make the club in the tub, right? And then Austin Schlottman, of course, who has been up and down. I kind of think one of Reed and Schlottman now get cut, just kind of as a numbers game. But in a recent prediction I did for the Minnesota Football Party, which you can find, by the way, on the Locked On Minnesota Sports podcast feed. It's an ensemble show with me and Arif Hassan and Luke Inman and Sam Ekstrom. We did O-line predictions, and in mine, I cut Oli Udoh. Just on pure merit, just because I thought he was the guy that kind of has had the 10th best camp of all the offensive linemen, and I only kept 9. So that is, I guess, where that lands, where you kind of have maybe, it's you have Oli Udoh being a backup tackle and maybe an emergency guard, and then you have Jesse Davis being a backup guard and maybe an emergency tackle. But I think the contract kind of does a little bit of work for you here, just because Jesse Davis's contract is very uncuttable, and Oli Udoh's isn't. And also, yeah, I'll say, I think Jesse Davis has had a better camp on the whole than Oli Udoh. So even on merit, I would still probably keep Davis. Udoh has been really volatile, and he's still Holdy Udoh. a little bit still really grabby and has that panicky thing, it might be time. Solid run for a 6th-round pick, but it might be time. So Ed Ingram is the starter, and I want to, let's make sure we focus on that too. So he's got the mean streak. He is the exact same guy he was in college, and I think that should be, we should have high expectations for that. I think that works out, and it looks like it's working out. He's very sound. He doesn't have the most lateral movement, and he doesn't have the most control over his movement. He had a couple of reps in the preseason game where he fires off to the second level and then he totally overruns it, or he doesn't really break down and find his place and seal the guy off, and then he gets beat by the linebacker or whatever. Some of that is on guys next to him, namely Schlottman. So combo blocking is a thing. When you're watching a combo block and you want to see if somebody messed up, first watch the defensive lineman that they double team. And whoever climbs up to the second level needs to get a good shove on that guy. Otherwise, the guy who stays on that defensive lineman for the whole play is kind of screwed. And vice versa. If the guy who stays on the defensive lineman for the whole play doesn't get the seal he's supposed to get, that defensive lineman can prevent the climbing O-line from actually climbing, from getting to the second level. You might remember a lot of talk about this when we were talking about Shamar Stephen a couple years ago. That he was very good at preventing offensive linemen from being able to climb to the second level, and that was the year that Eric Kendricks made All-Pro and got 10,000 tackles. And Andre Patterson insisted, and Kendricks himself insisted, oh yeah, no, that's because Shamar Stephen is in front of me, keeping linemen off of me. So if you're the climbing lineman, you don't want that to happen to you. But if you don't get enough of a push on that combo block, you might kind of hang your teammate out to dry. And then if they fire off, they might, suddenly be in the wrong spot and stuff. It's something to watch. I can't say that was a huge pattern or something, but that's how I watch combo blocks. I saw enough movement for me to feel okay. I'm not saying this is a benchable thing for Ingram, and I do think he's won the job, and I think he deserves to win the job. But it is something that might cause run plays to fail in the future if you're looking for a weakness. But otherwise, he's really stout. He's really mean. He's really, really, really hard to move. You want anchor? You got anchor. This guy's all anchor. And he's phenomenal looking for work. And what that means is in pass protection, they rush 4 and there are 5 linemen. Sometimes there's a guy that has nothing to do. So you look for work. You look for somebody to help out. There was more than one occasion when Austin Schlottman would start getting walked back and start losing on a bull rush. And Ed Ingram, not having an assignment, would look for work. He'd turn around and he'd just take Austin Schlottman's guy, take that nose tackle off his cleats from the side. And then boom, yay, everyone won the rep, even though Schlottman was losing it. He kind of ex machinas, right? And comes in and saves it. That may excite you if you can envision such a thing happening with the starting center. Who knows? Maybe that's the kind of thing that is a pattern for him, that maybe it'd be nice to have a right guard come in and help him out in that sense. When we talk about maybe Bradbury improves if only he has competent right guard play next to him. I think that's a way overblown point, but if you are going to hang on to it, that's kind of what it looks like. The looking for work, looking for help, being able to be part of a double team more often, and that double teaming player not hanging you out to dry as much. Jesse Davis was a mess. He also got bull rushed really bad in the 49ers joint practice, which we'll talk about next, that they just really blew up. But what really tears it for me is, okay, Ed Ingram got all the first team reps in the joint practice. That sends a signal. Those are very, very valuable reps for evaluation. And if they aren't even gathering information to evaluate, that tells me they're probably done evaluating. And you know what? So am I. He won the job. Congrats. So I do want to move into what we took from the joint practices with the 49ers at TCO. But first, I want to talk to you about hiring. So here's the deal. If you don't know, I've been doing a history documentary on my Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. And for that, I hired an animator. I actually have animated sequences in each of the episodes that I paid somebody to do, and hiring is not something that I am very used to. Now, thankfully, I have a friend that I knew could do it, but if I ever need to hire again, I gotta go to LinkedIn. That is exactly where you can go to find whoever is good at whatever you need them to be good at. It can help your small business fire on all cylinders. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs, and you can use all of their simple tools and screening questions and stuff to make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skill set for exactly what you need. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out all the fantasy podcasts. We have Locked On Fantasy Football, Locked On Dynasty, doing all sorts of top lists, helping you out with your drafts because you're probably drafting like this week or close to it. Also, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. You can find the history documentary there. I'm very, very excited about it. Tomorrow, if you are a patron, if you join me on Patreon, you can actually see episode 4 tomorrow. Otherwise, you got to wait a whole extra day. It is about the 80s, so you get all kinds of iconic moments. You get the end of the Metrodome, or the end of the Metropolitan Stadium, the construction of the Metrodome. You get the Les Steckel year. You get the 1987 year multiple strikes and the Herschel Walker trade. It is a wild ride of a decade, let me tell you. So go check out that at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. Let's talk about these joint practices. So the headline seems to be, and this is all secondhand, but the headline seems to be, holy crap, the Vikings kind of killed them. They kind of kicked a whole bunch of butt. The one that really eye pops for me is that it sounds like Christian Darrisaw held his own against Nick Bosa, which sounds a lot like defeating Nick Bosa. There was one-on-one rep where Bosa killed Darrisaw and like swam him or something, got right past him. But other than that, it's been at least stalemates, and stalemates are wins for the O-line. That's very funny because there's been all this stuff about, it's not attributed to anyone, but multiple reporters have come out of Minnesota with a quote about, wow, they see a lot of possible Trent Williams and Christian Darrisaw. Darrisaw denies all this, and he's humble, and he says, I got a lot of work to get there, but I would love to get there. He's an idol of mine, all that stuff. It's really funny that Trent Williams is in town now and they can hang out. They can teach each other and play together. And I think that's the thing about these joint practices, particularly chummy for joint practices. There's been all kinds of brawls and fights and stuff going around. Not too much of that. There's been a little bit of jawing, a little bit of competitive intensity, and we like that a little bit, but nothing so crazy people are getting kicked out or anything like you see in Patriots Panthers where they're just brawling. It's like the headline of that. It's wild. But with the 49ers, I was really excited. I've said it on a whole bunch of shows now. I was really excited to see the kind of matchups. Man, you got Trent Williams. Let's see what Zadarius Smith has. Well, apparently Zadarius Smith had the day of his life, which is kind of wild. Zadarius Smith had been relatively quiet in camp. Not crazy quiet, not concerningly quiet in camp, but a little less than you thought you'd get from him. And then he's not going against Christian Darrisaw. He's going against Trent Williams instead, and he explodes. I'm working real hard not to jump way too soon to the conclusion that wants me to jump to about Darrisaw and Trent Williams. We're not going to do it, okay? We're going to be responsible, and I'm not going to be transitively, Christian Darrisaw is better than Trent Williams. Whoops. I'm not going to do it, okay? We're not saying that. I did not say that. You can't say that I said it. But you have stuff like Cameron Dantzler having a really nice day against, Brandon Ayuk. And, Deebo Samuel, doing as much as he can there. Justin Jefferson had not as great of a day at a couple drops. But otherwise, if you just look at the way he runs routes and the way that, the 49ers are just helpless against him. And, when I say not the best day, I'm saying not the best day for Justin Jefferson. He was still probably the best player on the field, but just, by less a little bit than in past days. But he's just, unguardable. And plus the 49ers are missing a couple of corners, so it's, also guys that probably shouldn't be trying to guard Justin Jefferson anyways, so he's just, playing with his food. And then on the other side, you get Nick Bosa, you get Eric Armstead, and apparently Ed Ingram did really well in that. You get, the D-line that they have, the receivers that they have against the corners and everything. A lot of really good, George Kittle is now blocking our defensive ends. It's a really good, I like the way their roster is comprised insofar as it tests the players I really wanted to see tested. I really wanted to see Christian Darrisaw get the hardest guy you can imagine, and Nick Bosa is one of them. I really wanted to see Cameron Dantzler really get tested, and that is very fun. So I'm excited to see this preseason game. The other thing that happened is Kirk Cousins is back. And so we might see a little bit of him in the preseason game. But there's also a little bit to talk about there and a little more to talk about in terms of like where the depth chart is shaping up. Because here's the deal. I might do a 53-man thing tomorrow. Because it kind of seems like the depth chart is really starting to solidify. There's not a lot of battles that don't feel like they have a clear front runner right now. The only ones that are like super murky are like punter. And if you really want to be like super neutral, backup quarterback. Still feel like there's some like, it's like 55-45 at most in those ones. And, special teams and stuff. So that is all stuff that I think we need to sort of talk out, and I kind of need to talk out my take on like in real time about that. But before we do that, let me change the tone a little bit. Here is the deal. Drive sober or get pulled over. This is important, all right? Everybody knows you're not supposed to drive drunk. We're all told all the time. You see all the commercials, you see all the billboards and all of that stuff. And yet, you've had a couple. You got to get home. Ah, crap. Is my car parked? Can I leave it there overnight? You start to think logistically and you go, I'll risk it. No, don't do that. You dingus. You little stinker. Don't go do that. There are cops out there all the time watching that stuff, so you will get pulled over. Drive sober or get pulled over. But also, that's dangerous, man. What the heck? Cars weigh like 2,500 pounds, and they go like 80 miles per hour. And if you make a mistake because you're just a little buzzed, just a little bit, I'm feeling okay, I only had a couple, you're still like unbelievably dangerous. Don't do that. So, look, if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, please think again. Do it for me, all right? Play it safe, plan ahead, get a ride, take an Uber, take a cab. It only takes one stupid decision, and when we've had a couple, that's when we start to make more of those, to change your life or someone else's. Just be safe about it, all right? I love you. I don't want to see anything bad happen to you. Be safe. All right, so some other observations from the joint practice against the San Francisco 49ers. There was one play where Danny Gray, my guy, really scorched Patrick Peterson. Seems like that was the only bad play that he had on the day, but a big long bomb to Danny Gray. He's just like all speed. He also knows how to run routes, and he's very good. He only fell that far in the draft because he went to a small school, and everybody could have seen that, so taking my victory lap. I'm taking my premature victory lap on Danny Gray. Otherwise, the Vikings won in the red zone. They won in the situationals for the most part. I think the 49ers actually did manage to get a field goal off in their like situational drill, but they needed to convert like a really unlikely fourth down to do it. There was, I think, a sack or something that knocked them back, and so it was like still a good looking situational drill. And then the Vikings offense, Justin Jefferson was just unguardable. Like if they played a real game on Saturday, I would be like, Justin Jefferson's going for 300. Like it seemed like they just did not have anybody who could guard him. And in most preseason situations, most camp situations, it's going to be a lot of one-on-ones. You're not going to start like calling warped coverages to double Justin Jefferson in like training camp, right? You're just going to call it vanilla and watch guys get beat. So which leads to this really fun stuff of just guys like having their absolute way with other NFL players. Kirk Cousins is back from COVID. He missed the preseason game with that and all that. So I don't know if you're going to see any of him in the 49er game. I don't think you were going to see any of him in the Vegas game. But if they do play him in the 49er game, it'll be like one series. He'll get like 8 reps. It won't be much. And I don't know if it should be much either. Like he's fine. Like he's ready. Unless he feels like if he comes to you and says, I feel like I need the reps. But I feel like that can kind of be up to him, and whatever he feels like he needs. And if he doesn't feel like you need it, keep him on ice, save him for the regular season. But for whatever it's worth, in camp, he was wheeling and dealing to Justin Jefferson like he has been all of camp. There was one interception that looked like it was just a misfire. And there was a lot of passion from Kirk Cousins. Here's the deal. I'm baffled. I'm blown away. Kirk Cousins swore. It's wild. I know this is like a fundamentally unserious news item, but I can't get over it. Like, he's such a repressed guy, and I love to see some intensity from Kirk Cousins. To me, intensity for Kirk Cousins is a step toward leadership in a way that he hasn't had leadership here, and that's very speculative. Like, I'm not in the locker room, and if somebody in the locker room said, like, nah, you're wrong about that, I'd be like, okay, like, I wouldn't even argue. But I'd love to see intensity out of Kirk Cousins. Like when he won that Monday Night Football game, and it looked like he was ready to like fight anyone. Like that is the piss and vinegar I want to see out of Kirk Cousins. So I love seeing that intensity, that ramped up stuff, and I'm especially in camp. I am very pro Kirk Cousins throwing dangerous passes. Now, I saw a clip of the interception, and it looked like it was just a miss, so whoopsie. But either way, I like seeing. I want to see aggressiveness, especially in the preseason. If we do get to see Kirk Cousins play, I want him to throw dangerous passes. I want him to push the envelope. I want him to get comfortable pushing the envelope in a way that he was never really comfortable doing in the last couple of years, despite the public begging of his head coach. If he can get it here with O'Connell, I would feel really great about that. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff from the joint practice that I missed. There'll be another one. We'll break it down, and I'll probably do 53, or at least check in on some other position battles and stuff, because it kind of seems like things are really starting to metastasize, if you will. I will see you all tomorrow with that. In the meantime, check out the history doc, and as always, Skull.